Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Shaylin Sluzales, and I am an April board member and facilitator of the call today. And thank you all for joining us for this workshop on effectively supporting and accommodating centers for independent living staff. I want to mention a few housekeeping items before we get started today. First, when you scroll over the screen, a menu bar pops up. Depending on what device you are on, you can find that menu bar at the top or at the bottom of the screen, and that is where you will find the closed captioning for today's session. You can view the captioning by selecting the CC tab on the menu bar. And for sign language interpreting, you can find the interpreter on the screen. If you would like to change the size of the screen, if the slides are shown as they are being shown at the moment, you can select the line in the middle to make the slides larger or smaller. If you have any technical issues, please let us know in the chat. You can find the word bubble in that same menu bar. And if you would like to turn the chat feature off, if you are using a screen reader, you can do that by pressing Alt-H, or please use the info and help section on the conference website for more help. For Q&A times, please let us know in the Q&A box is in your menu bar, and please only submit questions there as they can get lost in the chat. And I know Kimberly and Jerry are encouraging lots of questions, so please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A box as they come to you. And to ask a question or make a comment, you can also select the hand option on the menu bar. That allows us to know that you have a question. And for those of you that are on the phone today or using keystrokes, we ask that you press *9 or Alt-Y on your keypad to raise your hand. We will then let you know when you can unmute, and you can select the unmute option or Alt-A if using keystrokes. Remember, if you join into the conversation, please keep all background noise down as much as possible to allow us to hear you clearly. And thank you all again for joining us. Let's get started. I'll pass it off to Kimberly and Jerry to do that. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Shaylin. Hi, everyone. You are in the session for effectively supporting and accommodating CIL staff. As centers, we are no stranger to having a diverse staff, and so the session will be all about how we can support and appropriately create that culture that we're all driving for. My name is Kimberly Tiso. I am the President and Chief Executive Officer of ABLE South Carolina, and also the proud board chair of April. And I am a woman in my 40s with short blonde hair. Today, I am wearing a headband and tortoiseshell glasses and a denim top. And if I was presenting with you in person, I am also a person with a physical disability, among other disabilities, but my style of mobility is to walk on titanium crutches after being a survivor of childhood cancer. My pronouns are she and her, and I am going to pass it over to Jerry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jerry Davison, the Senior Vice President and Chief Program Officer, and that says Chief Executive Officer. So that is not my title. Chief Program Officer here at ABLE South Carolina. Apologies there. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair, and I am wearing a tannish colored sweater today.
Great, so we're going to get started. And so I want to start off by talking a little bit about ABLE South Carolina staff. Our Center for Independent Living is in the Columbia, South Carolina. That is the capital. And we also have an office in Greenville, South Carolina. We serve 23 Part C counties, which is exactly half of our state. And so we do have a little bit of a bigger team. We've got about a team of 58 right now. And on this image, you will see our team in blue Advocacy Day for Access and Independence shirts. We are people of great diversity with all types of different disabilities, different races, different backgrounds. And we do a lot of advocacy, but also making sure that we really are proud and loud with being disability led and making sure that we are a model employer for people with disabilities to ensure that we are the experts with accommodations and making sure that there is a positive and a welcoming culture for all people with different disabilities. So just a little bit of makeup of our staff. We really try very, very hard to ensure that we are representing as many disabilities as possible. And so on our staff now, we do represent people who have vision disabilities, hearing, of course, physical disabilities, health, respiratory, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, intellectual and developmental disabilities, autism, autoimmune, spinal cord injury, ADHD, psychosis, processing, speech, mobility, and so many more, because a lot of our staff on our organization do have a lot of dual diagnoses and multiple disabilities. And so we want to make sure that, we are matching the consumers that we are serving as much as possible, and also making sure that we have all of our staff have the tools in place to effectively do their job, but also be supported within the culture of our organization. And of course, in addition to different disabilities, we do have a lot of intersections within our organization. Of course, different ages, races, different religions, educational backgrounds, professional experiences, gender identity, sexual orientation, and life experiences. And that, of course, makes us better to be able to reach the population that we serve, because we do have so many intersections within our organization, and our staff are representing these different intersections. So we're able to relate, and we also do a lot of work around other marginalized communities in South Carolina to ensure that we are ingraining those experiences. So just unique individuals. And so, of course, people with disabilities may have different needs as non-disabled people, but I do want to just preference, I think setting up the culture of our organizations are really important, and really even teaching our community that every staff should be appropriately accommodated, not just staff with disabilities either. So making sure you open up and making, all employers, and I know all CILs are wanting our staff to be equipped with the tools that they need. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of culture today, but also how do we make our accommodation process and the openness of our organization, how can we continue to do a better job? And we'll give you some examples of what we do with some of our work. So unique approaches. Obviously, when you think about accommodations, you often think about assisted technology. I think that's where a lot of minds go. You think about ramps and physical architectural, but it's so much more than that. Those are the accommodations that you can see are the physical ones, but there's so many different approaches that you can give support to your staff. And it also likely means trial and error. Sometimes you have to really explore what's going to work for someone and try things out. You're not going to get it done the first time. You're not going to find the perfect tool to assist all of your staff the first time when you provide it. And so really working on trial and error, but obviously not giving up with that, because we all believe that people with disabilities can work and appropriately accommodated. And sometimes that is just really thinking outside the box and looking at what's going to work and what's not. Employee directed, of course, we are consumer directed. We absolutely know what this means, but also making this process employee directed. What are they needing? We don't know what it is to live with all types of different disabilities. And so really listening to your staff on what they are needing to better perform within their job. And then individual accommodations and also universal options. So really looking at, what could help one person could possibly help others, and how can we make our organizations more of that universal approach where a type of modification can help everyone, not only our staff members, all staff members with different disabilities, but also the folks that come in, whether they be stakeholders or consumers within your organization. And then CIL employers. And so something that I have seen and something that is kind of put into the culture of our organization, sometimes we know that people, and I've definitely lived this and have seen this as a person with a disability, who have had a disability, most of my life. I have seen that we have been given special treatment. I have seen that we're not always held to the same expectations. And so sometimes when CIL staff are coming in, we have to really work with them to help them because of the damage that society has done by giving them special treatment or not holding them to expectations. And so sometimes we have to really work with them and really provide independent living skills services around this. But as we all know, disability does not mean an employer should give any type of special treatment. Shift the essential job functions. So if you have you're hiring for essential job, for a position that has essential job functions, they have to be qualified with or without accommodations. And so making sure that you're not removing essential duties, because that could become a burden on your organization or someone else. Enable any learned helplessness. And so really working, again, I think the disability community, and I can speak to this as a person with a disability, people like to do things for us. The general public likes to do things for us. And so sometimes within all of our communities, we have the sense of learned helplessness. And so how can we as a CIL kind of reverse that within the culture of our organization? And of course, as being a disability-led organization, we are uniquely positioned to offer the best place of employment as possible because we understand our employees. Understanding and encouragement, peer support, and lived experience. There's times of mentoring our staff, being that peer-to-peer with our staff is really important. A bit of tough love when needed. I have had to do that quite a bit, and sometimes it's easy for our staff to fall into that pity model sometimes. And so how can us as disabled leaders also provide that a little bit of tough love when needed? I think everyone needs that kick sometimes. I know I've had it in my life. Creative solutions, really, again, that's thinking outside the box, really doing that trial of error, and then ongoing support and encouragement. And so, and sometimes, and this is something that's not spoken about a lot, but when you have staff that have been on your team for quite some time, there's also disability progression, which I don't think our community talks about enough. So somebody who has been able to do a job and perform a job for many years, that may change. And so accommodations may change with the progression of someone's disability or changes. So workplace culture. So something that we, and I just had a talk with our leadership staff this week about, really making sure that our culture is set up to, not everything has to be a one-on-one accommodation. There should be things put in our system, but we should be the most accepting organization to allowing flexibility and modifications within ensuring we're getting the job done. So I think it's really important for leadership on staff to talk about our own disabilities and strategies that we use for support. I know as someone who has had a physical disability since the age of 2, I have had a significant amount of progression throughout the years of my disability. And so I'm talking to staff about that. And, recently I've seen a lot of staff not really feel that comfortable with some of their progression or some of their barriers that they're facing with their own disabilities. And so we recently purchased scooters for both of our offices for staff to check out if they're going somewhere that's going to require long walking distances, and really kind of just encouraging those tools in place. We've got Alexa that's hooked up to our copier so that people can actually talk to it to make copies versus having to see the keys. And we've kind of done that kind of throughout our office just to make it more welcoming. And so we've got adjustable lighting. We've got a number of different strategies in place to make it, where folks can customize their environment a little bit more or have the tools that they need that they might not need every single day. Staff, particularly leadership staff, are encouraged to talk about their disabilities on our team and experience with our coworkers as a form of peer support. And so really offering that peer-to-peer whenever we feel comfortable to do so. And I know just last week, I had a staff member come to me who is getting surgery, and they wanted my assistance with helping them prepare for their surgery. And so it's really important to be able, they would not know the surgeries that I've had if I had not shared that. And so they were coming to me as that peer-to-peer. And so that was really meaningful to be able to provide that ongoing support to staff. We have had staff meeting series where staff volunteered to share the accommodations they use in the workplace. And these are examples not only help staff, but ideas to also support consumers in the workplace. And so really being open. And we also encourage this environment where, we talk about possibilities of accommodations where, if someone is struggling to do a position, what can we do as a team to better support them? And so really having that be an open dialogue where it is a safe place to talk about accommodations. And then normalizing it from the very beginning. Of course, when you're posting job announcements, making sure that you're posting, that these are essential duties with or without accommodations, making sure that, there is a process if someone needs an accommodation during the interview. Mention that, people with disabilities are encouraged to apply, and that really shows that welcoming environment. Putting it in your policies, making sure you have strong policies that talks about accommodations, talks about tools to do the job, talk about the supports and having, the benefits to support staff too. I know that we recently changed our 401k for retirement. And we really wanted to think outside the box with our retirement policy, because as many of you know, people with disabilities can actually retire earlier than non-disabled people with Social Security. And so we wanted a retirement program so they're not penalized and so that they can pull out their retirement early if they need to. But we've got this, all of our benefits really look at the disability supports, mental health services. We've got a employee assistance program that we provide. If someone needs counseling, there's a number of series of counseling that our staff can get per year, and just getting extra support. But really making your policies really open. We've completely and open for everybody because of that intersection with disability, really thinking about multi-marginalized staff members as well. And so a couple of years ago, we took out all gender in any of our policies and procedures and IL services. And so really focusing on how can you be more inclusive all around within your organization. In your marketing for new positions, really showing that you're hiring people with disabilities as well, because we are disability led. And so really promoting that. In your orientation, making sure that they understand the supports that they can request, what an accommodation is in that process of requesting it. And then also, I know that our leadership team, if they have accommodations, they also talk about that during the orientation process, so that they can kind of model that from the very beginning, that this is the norm within our organization for our staff to have accommodations or tools in place to support them. And open it up for everyone. Again, I don't think there's an employer out there that doesn't want to give their staff the tools to be able to do their job. And so really opening up, making it the culture for everyone. If you have non-disabled staff, making that open to them as well, so that if they do need something to better perform, that you are going to be able to provide that. I know for a long time in our staff, the adjustable desks were very popular. Everyone wanted the ability to sit and stand. And so almost everyone was requesting those at some time. And that works for everyone. Well, most everyone. So really, opening up that process. And then, of course, again, the job descriptions, this should be, absolutely the norm, making sure that you're not putting, that a driver's license is required, especially if the job doesn't require a driver's license. We're very sensitive about education requirements in our state. Not everyone gets a high school diploma who have disabilities, including people with intellectual disabilities. And so we are very careful with saying that high school diplomas are required oftentimes as well. So being really open and mindful about how you're setting up that job description. I'm going to
wait. I did want to say something about the picture on the last slide. That's actually from one of our Facebook postings. It's a picture of a white male with glasses. He is in a power chair, and it seems to be a chair where he uses his mouth to do a lot of the controlling. And this was, when this popped up on my Facebook feed, it made me smile because it's clear that, this is a person that we would hire. And so, it's setting that tone right from the start. And it says, we're hiring independent living specialists, and it has our logo.
Thanks for catching that, Jerry.
Yeah, no problem.
And I am going to pass it off to Jerry so that Jerry can talk about the scenarios for disability accommodations and some of the things that we have in place within our organization.
Yeah, and so we're gonna talk through some scenarios, and we have just taken some of the situations we've had with staff members and looked to ways to figure out how to best support them. And so we're going to get into some specifics here. Some of the information may be changed just to protect our staff members, but we wanted to talk about how it is more than just the disability that we need to look at. There's lots of lived experience that may be into play, and so and talk with you all about some tools that you think may be helpful, and just kind of brainstorm with each other. So Kimberly, it's still on that same slide from me. Is it stuck for you? Oh, there he goes. Okay. All right. And so scenario one, a staff member with an intellectual disability was having difficulty with remote work during our hybrid schedule. And so I wanted to just talk through some of the strategies that we tried with this individual. I don't know how many of you all use Microsoft's to-do list, but there's an option to share those to-do lists. And so the supervisor and the staff member had a shared to-do list. So the supervisor could add things as the staff member was checking things off, and the supervisor could track the progress. And so it was a good way for when they weren't in the same location to be able to still monitor progress. And that was another way to just give step-by-step instructions for common tasks to refer back to. So let's say that the staff member is doing data entry on a regular basis, and there are certain steps that they need to go through every day. It may be a good idea to put those steps in writing so that if the staff member has trouble remembering or has a cognitive disability or just does better with structure, then that is something they can always refer back to, and the staff and the supervisor is not having to consistently remind, and the staff member is not forgetting to do certain steps. Those step-by-step instructions can be so key for a lot of different types of disabilities and a lot of people's work style. One of the things is increasing the days in the office where there's more structure and less distractions. That's not disability specific either. Some people just work better in the office where they have less distractions. And so one of the things that we did with this employee was increasing the days that they came into the office. Another strategy was just providing some tips and tools to other staff members who work with that staff on how to communicate more clearly with her. Sometimes the mess up was in the directions that they were giving. It was not concrete, it was not clear. And so training our staff members on how to give clearer instructions was something that was helpful. And then will you go to the next slide, Kimberly? And so I wanted to talk with you all about some tools to stay on task. So what are some tools, strategies, or accommodations your coworkers or consumers use, or that you can think of to help with time management, organization, prioritizing tasks, and remembering processes? So if you want to put it in the chat, however is easiest for you to participate, we'd love to hear some ideas. And while we're waiting for that to come in, we had a question, Kimberly, about alternatives to CIL Suite that may be more accessible. And before you jump in to answer that, Kimberly, I did want to say one thing that we have done with CIL Suite with case notes to make case note entry easier for some folks who can get overwhelmed with the open-endedness of a case note. We made like a copy and paste template. So it's like, who was at the meeting? How long did you meet? What was learned? What was discussed? Did you learn anything new about consumer? And they can just copy and paste that in and answer those questions instead of doing this broad open-ended narrative. And so that's helped a lot of our folks who are really getting overwhelmed with the open-endedness of the case notes. But I'll let you jump in, Kimberly, to talk about that.
Yeah, and there was a question that said, so from Grace Trump Power that said, hey, well, nope, it said, just wanted to ask if you knew any alternatives to Center for Independent Living Suite, which is CIL Suite. I and many other autistic people find it cognitively inaccessible. And so within our team, we really did, we had MyCIL when I first came onto the organization, and it was not a system that's on the cloud and very difficult to use. And so we really tested out a number of different programs. There's a number of different database systems that you can test out and purchase for use of your data collection. But CIL Suite was the most accessible one. I think that when there are maybe accessibility issues with understanding how to use it, really developing a tool with step-by-step instructions, and then just working with your staff. Like Jerry said, there for case notes, we have created just a simpler tool that we can assist staff with to kind of make sure that they're putting in the needed information, and we'll assist them with their case notes, but step-by-step instructions. And I think the more somebody uses it, the more they get familiar with it all. I think all database systems can be very complicated. And so it is important to, find a database system that works the best for your organization.
And I see some good comments from Alex in the chat. So just about the database system, they use a different database, but they also said that some folks from their organization will type their notes with their AT, and then the admin assistant enters the notes for them. So that's great, because that means they don't have to navigate a system that may be more cumbersome. So that's one way around it, is to utilize admin support to actually do the data entry and allow folks to just type it in their own document. Alex, as far as the original question, said that they use Microsoft Teams to help collaborate, which is something we use a lot as well. And then they have a calendar for all outreach events and social media items. And I love that too. I will say that for me, my calendar is kind of my plan for the week. I sit down at the beginning of the week and I look at where my meetings are. I look at what I have to do, and then I set those specific chunks of time to work on actual projects that aren't meetings and is on my calendar. And we have had some supervisors who have worked with their staff members at the beginning of the week, especially if they're a new professional and they haven't really learned how to work in a job that has less structure, where you set your own schedule, to look at the beginning of the week and break down tasks and figure out how the best way to use that calendar in a way to make sure that they have enough time to do the task. And so those can absolutely be great tools. Thanks for sharing, Alex. And feel free to keep commenting in if you think of items as we go. We're going to go on to the next scenario. So this is a staff member with ADHD and a psychiatric disability had a difficult time with criticism, which led to some conflict with supervisors and an unfounded fear of being fired and a prolonged need for reassurance and encouragement. So every time we were coming with some feedback, the staff member would just kind of panic and think that they were going to be fired. And so, we talked about trial and error and trying to figure out what works. One strategy that didn't work was just a reassurance that her her job was safe, and that management believed in her capacity to do well. We would tell her this, but for some reason this just kept reoccurring. And so then we got some additional information after we kind of had some meetings and some one-on-ones, and we're like, well, what's going on here? We found out that a supervisor from her previous employment had made her feel really incompetent, and like her job was at risk on a regular basis. And so then we get to this like root of why this fear is there. There was also something else going on. The staff had recently come out, and there were some key members of her family that were not accepting. And so there was some home life and family life where she just didn't feel accepted. And so that kind of was, I think, bleeding into the workplace and not feeling like a part of the organization. And so with the next slide, we talked, and Kimberly started spending a lot more time with her. They scheduled regular meetings and virtual coffee time so that they could talk, and she could get to know Kimberly a little bit better and realize that Kimberly's not as intimidating as some people think she is. And then I was just working on some projects with her. There were some places where our jobs intersected, and as we got to work together, I think she kind of felt more comfortable with us, and everything that was coming down from us didn't feel like it was coming from a place of judgment, but a place of support. And so that staff member was able to develop that trust and confidence through those interactions, and now appreciates that direct, honest feedback. I mean, she was hungry for that. It just always was a self-confidence issue there. And so this is what I like to call the emotional deposits approach. If you've read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, there's some talk of we have to put in the work to build that rapport, because if all a staff member is hearing is criticism, then they're going to feel like they're not doing a good job. And so sometimes, even as busy as you may be, taking that time to spend time and develop that rapport so staff members can build that confidence to be the employee that we know they can be. And the staff member has amazing knowledge to bring to the organization. And then the next slide. So I wanted to ask you all, throw it back out to the group, what are some tools, strategies, or accommodations that may build confidence and self-esteem in your coworkers and consumers? What have you all used when someone has been flailing a little bit or just didn't have self-confidence when they came in? And like I said, that can be a consumer or a coworker, but I'd love to hear some strategies from you all about something that worked for y'all. And I realize it may take a little bit for you all to put it in the chat. I will say for some of us, and myself included, we are perfectionists or high performers, so we put a lot of value in our work quality, and so that critique can always be a tough space for us. And so one of the things that I have as an accommodation is to ask for some of that feedback in advance, just so I have time to process it. Or if a problem has come up, to get that in writing, even if it's informal through a chat, so I have time to like look into the issue and figure out the whole scenario and what's going on with the project, so that I can report back meaningfully and knowledgeably. Well, thanks, Alex, for being our star participator today. I appreciate it. Identifying small wins and giving praises is what Alex is saying in the chat, and I think that's really, really important. You gotta celebrate those successes at the end of every staff meeting, which we do virtually for an hour every 2 weeks. We try and save time for staff praise, and any staff member can give praise to another staff member. We also have some complex case discussion meetings, and there's time in there to share some consumer successes as well. And then Carrie says, asking for their opinions, letting others know that they are hearing what they have to say. You may not take that opinion into practice, but reassuring others that they are being heard helps. And that's so important. That communication isn't one-sided, that people feel like they can say when something isn't going right or when something's making them feel uneasy. I love that. Pam says, lots of praise in everything they do, group get-togethers as well as individuals, absolutely. Alex. And when something went well, ask the person to write a newsletter article or ask someone to interview them for our newsletter. That's a great way to celebrate successes in a concrete way. Joel, I'm not sure which way it pronounced that. Positive coaching and asking employee how I can help employee and what their needs may be. Yes, we're consumer directed, right? We want to know what strategies will support them. And then Alex again, and we end every staff meeting with at least one positive thing from work or personal, so folks feel connected and let each other know their pet names and what's going on in their life. I think those are all. They love when you share their pets on the screen, right? Awesome. All right, we'll move on to the next one. All right, scenario number 3, staff member with a psychiatric disability was experiencing significant mental health symptoms and checked themselves into an intensive treatment program. So some other information to know, because that background information can play a key role in problem solving, but the staff member had recently moved to the area and did not have a support network nearby. And the staff member's parents had a history of doubting her ability to live independently due to her disabilities, which limited her trust and ability to use them as a support. So they're limited in their support network geographically, and then also limited in how much they want to tell their parents about what's going on, because they have concerns about guardianship. And so some strategies that we used would be on that next slide, which I think it might be a little bit difficult, but I think I know enough about the situation. But so one thing was, since they were checked into a facility, that phone use was limited. And so it was important for Kimberly and I to be on call after hours in case we got a call from that staff member who needed support, because they might not be able to call during regular work hours. And so I know if I got a call on my cell phone from that number, I was in a restaurant one night and I just ran out and took the call outside, because I didn't want to miss the one time of the day that person might have access to their phone. We asked for specific ways we could help, and we really want to be specific here, because some people have a hard time asking for help. So like, what do you need or wish you had there? And so we were able to provide them with some comfy lounge clothes and some hygiene items. They didn't really like the options that were provided to them there. They weren't really effective, and so we went out and got their favorite brand of hygiene items and just dropped it off. And that's just a simple, easy way to show that we support. Access to the sick leave pool. We do not want staff, when they're in a crisis, to be worried about losing their paycheck. That is the last thing. That's only going to exacerbate it. So just reassuring them not to worry about that. That's something we would take care of. We would figure that all out for them to take care of themselves as the first priority.
And that's another policy that you can put in place as well with getting your board approval. But we have this leave that if someone exhausts all of their leave, that there is an ability to pull from a sick leave pool from donated sick time from other staff members or staff that have not used their sick leave for the year. And so having that as an option, and that's helped with crises, surgeries, just accidents before. So really looking at, again, how can you support everyone?
And then we have a question in the audience, and this is about a specific accommodation and supporting individuals. And this one is really disappointing to hear. But it says, my employer has told me that I cannot store my insulin in the work fridge, and then I cannot have it in a fridge in my office. It normally isn't an issue, but I did run out of my open bottle recently and had to leave early to go home to get an unopened bottle. I requested to keep an unopened bottle at work to prevent this from happening again, but the employer is saying there's some issues with that because the work fridge is accessible to all personnel and visitors, and they don't want someone to take it, but then there's concern about leaving it in a fridge in their office because someone can take it when they're not here. They also worry about the fridge losing power. The insurance company says it's a liability. One thing that came up off the top of my head is a way to lock a personal fridge in the office so that nobody does have access to it. There's also battery packs. We have battery packs in our office for when we lose power. So the plug could be plugged into a battery pack so that if power is lost, then that battery pack kicks in. Kimberly, I don't know if you've got any other ideas there, but that shouldn't be an issue.
No, and I hope that's not within a CIL, but there's just the lock boxes that you can buy for the refrigerator as well. And you can purchase those anywhere, but you can just put your medication and have a key to it. You could put that box in the refrigerator and pull it out when needed. But I mean, insulin and diabetes is a disability. And so that's something a lot of people don't know, but health conditions, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, those are considered disabilities, and it is protected. You are protected under the ADA. So you should be able to store that on site as an accommodation under the ADA.
And then Alex had a question about the sick leave pool and how that donated sick time impacts our finances.
Yeah, so just all staff members are allocated, sick time. Some staff members don't use it. And so it's already budgeted in and already padded within our budget. So we have it already in place for when somebody needs it.
Another thing that we did that was interesting in this scenario where the individual was in this psychiatric facility is they sent her parents a notice of commitment hearing, and so the staff member reached out to see if I would be able to advocate with the staff's mother and the appointed attorney to make sure that this did not turn into a commitment. And so we were able to talk through that and make sure that this didn't go any further. This was just the voluntary treatment that the staff member had sought out, and that's something, it's something we do. We make sure people don't get institutionalized, and so that was something that we were able to do. And then go ahead, Kimberly.
No, and we were also positioning ourselves for this particular person within their hospitalization. Because guardianship and commitment came up several times. And so we were positioning ourselves to help support legally as well within our organization, just so that we can, because we are, one of the prime advocacy organizations within our state. And she, just because they were an employee doesn't mean that they don't get support from our organization. And so we were really preparing to provide them with as much support as possible.
And then upon discharge, we help brainstorm solutions for recognizing those symptoms and seek help sooner to avoid that hospitalization in the future. So really thinking through what that might look like, what symptoms led up to this, for her to need that inpatient, and how can we recognize and get help sooner to avoid that in the future. And so setting up some cues that, hey, if I'm behaving this way, will you let me know, so that I can kind of recognize that I may need to go to the doctor and adjust meds or relook at something. And then finally, we looked at, there was a request that came up to transfer closer to support system, and we're lucky enough to have 2 offices. And so that was something that we were able to support this individual in doing. And so throwing this out there, but what are some tools that you all have used for mental health support? We know right now, post-COVID or in the middle of COVID, I guess, that emotional health is as big of an issue as it has ever been. We know that people are more isolated. We know that people are having, more mental health concerns, and so what are some tools, strategies, and accommodations that your coworkers or consumers use to help with psychiatric episodes, or at times when they may need additional emotional and advocacy support? And I'd love to hear that. And some of these things that y'all have already commented on, I think also applies to that mental health boost. Sharing light moments in staff meeting where you praise, sharing wins, so that somebody's have a hard day, it helps pick them back up. But I'd love to know if y'all have anything else created in there. And then Carrie says, our director allows us to have a monthly care circle after staff meeting. We may have a lunch, see a movie, do a craft, or just connect with other staff. So having some designated downtime. I think that's really smart because I know we can get in the day to day and just go, I was at the office yesterday and I was just like, I grabbed my lunch and went back to my desk and was going to get back to work. And one of my coworkers like, hey, like, would y'all like to meet socially distance in the conference room and have lunch? And so, the four of us went in there and we had lunch together, and it was nice because that's just something that sometimes we just get so backed up in the day to day that we jump to the next thing. And so taking that time to build that morale. Joelle says we have had several trainings on self-care and use those skills learned to work with staff. Yes, so we've also kind of had some talk about self-care. I think there are some self-care questionnaires that are out there on the internet that you can look at and point those out to your staff because they may not be noticing some of those things. My counselor pointed out, gave me a self-care assessment, and some of the things on there, I was like, oh, it's like, are you showering every day? And it's like, on days I'm not going into the office, I have stopped showering. And so those are some things just to think about because that may be a sign that something else is going on. And it was for me. I ended up having I got a medication adjustment. I started seeing the counselor more regularly. It was like, are you completely checking out after work and just watching TV? Those kind of things. And so it may be just something to put out there to the staff so that they can recognize that maybe they're not doing a good job with self-care. Do we have some more questions pop up? Okay, I see where there's a suggestion in there that says offer to sign a liability waiver. That's a good suggestion for the insulin discussion, Max. That way that the employer is not so concerned about what happens if the medicine goes bad. And then I see one from Youth Lead NC. It says, how can employers lead a discussion about accommodations in a way that is encouraging and follows the ADA? Are independent contractors treated the same way as employers as far as receiving accommodations? I've had situations where independent contractors tried to ask for accommodations retroactively. And so this can be a little bit difficult when it's coming in through typing and we can't have the discussion to ask as many follow-up questions. But I know that we just talk openly, like we said earlier about the accommodations we all use. We ask staff members to share the accommodations that they use if they were willing to share the information with other staff to give them some ideas, so that nobody was required to disclose. It just was something that if they wanted to share and felt comfortable sharing, that they did. So that was one creative way that we talked about accommodations. And then as far as independent contractors treated the same way as employers as far as receiving accommodations. Kimberly, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, so as independent living, I'm not independent. See, all those words go together. So when I say something, and other words from our world comes together, but independent contractors are not considered staff members, and so they're not really protected under the ADA. But what I recommend disabled independent contractors to do is just build the accommodation needs within their contract. And so really outlining it, and if they need, alternative formats that from the person who is providing information, really making sure that's made up front for your independent living or independent contractor.
And then I see some more things have come in the chat. Maria says, we will get coffee or lunch together. We'll try to leave the building and sit outside if the weather allows. We also have access right now to free coaching for personal and work goals. And Kimberly, we didn't even talk about the EAP, but I don't know if you want to share that.
So something that is really affordable too, that you can easily add within your budget. I mean, it is not that expensive at all, is having an employee
assistance program.
Sorry. So the employee assistance program, what it does is it opens up any type of assistance that is needed for all of your staff. So part-time, full-time can benefit it. And I mean, they can get support for, mental health. They can get support for, creating wills, just, overall, just, any, asking questions. There's free trainings that are provided within EAP as well to be a better employee, and just having that opportunity in place. So looking up, we use SunTrust, which is the provider that we use, but really looking at that extra addition support outside of the organization, because not all staff members may feel comfortable with sharing some of their needs with you. But when they contact the employee assistance program, they don't have to come to us first. This is just, they go get support, and it is accessible support as well, which is something that we made sure that we looked into prior to going with this company. And so really looking at that option, I don't even think we pay. I mean, we may pay for all of our staff maybe about $1,500 a year. And it really pays off for our staff to have that extra layer of support.
And then there's some tools just listed here in general when you're thinking about accommodations. So there's Ask Jan. Of course, that's a website that has lots of accommodations out there. You can even find it by disability. Although, again, I want to point out that there's so many things that factor into what support's going to work for an individual. So it's not just a disability alone. And we all know that a certain disability can vary very much from one person to the next. So just being mindful of that. Microsoft to-do list, I mentioned, shared live documents, SharePoint, just so that that you can kind of see work progress, make comments in there, chat back and forth. Outlook calendars, so making sure due dates are on there, shared calendar invites, check-ins, encouragement notes. One thing that Kimberly has done is she bought a bunch of cute little note cards for management team a while back to give them a stack and give out to staff members. And then we know that that's not always accessible for everyone, so we also looked into Kudo boards, and so we have started using Kudo boards. We work with their staff at Kudo board to make sure it was accessible. It's still not fully accessible in the back end for someone creating the board, although it's gotten better. But for the staff members receiving it, it is. And so when someone's retiring, or when someone had a pet who passed away, there are ways we can all go on there and make a digital card, and we can each put our notes in there for that individual. Teams chat has been a great way. Someone mentioned that in our chat earlier, but just to check in with folks, I will sometimes ask my staff members to send me a GIF of how they're feeling that day, so that I can kind of get a heads up on where they're at emotionally. Assistive technology, obviously there's just a whole slew of assistive tech out there. If you aren't sure, there's just lots of resources out there, but I encourage you to check with other CILs, with other experts in the field, to see what may exist. And then just more accessible offices, looking at, is there a clear path? Is there the lighting there? How is the noise level? Just really looking to how to make your environment more accessible for all staff members.
And I would just say add to here is, making sure that whatever you're looking into, making sure that it is accessible is really important. It may not be accessible to everyone, and there may need to be workarounds, but definitely making sure that it is digitally accessible, because if you're sending something out that's not digitally accessible, you're meeting a great, a population within your organization. And I know we have several staff members who are blind, and some of the only platforms that we can use are accessible for that population, and we have to make kind of workarounds for other accommodation needs. But just keep that open. Don't go in, and this is accessibility is not optional within our organization too. So we make sure that whatever we do, there are alternative formats if it makes sense, if it needs to be, but making sure that whatever you're developing is fully accessible digitally, and then you can create from that.
And there's a question in the chat that says, I'm interested if others have had issues where people request accommodations retroactively and the strategies you use to navigate the situations. And so I'm very curious what you mean by retroactively, because if the time has already passed, I'm not following how. Now, if you mean they didn't ask it right away, that's okay. You know, you don't have to ask it right at the beginning of employment. You can ask for accommodations at any time in employment. But I'd love to hear more about what retroactively, what accommodation you could provide retroactively.
And I know within CIL culture too, we will see that sometimes we hire individuals and they identify as being somebody with a disability after learning disability culture and saying, oh, well, I do have this diagnosis, or I'm a part of the community. And we'll really look at accommodations that they may need later. But we, again, disability changes constantly. And so being able to move accommodations and adjust as needed so that staff members can perform and do the job.
And then I think that might be, that was the employment assistance program. Someone was asking in the Q&A about what accommodation services you provide for your staff that only cost about $1,500 per year. That's that SunTrust employee assistance program that offers some free counseling, some free legal assistance. There's a lot, some trainings. There's a lot of options there that are benefits to staff. And then Kimberly, is that our last slide?
That is our last slide.
Yes. And I do want to say thank you all so much for participating in the discussion. You all made it so much more enjoyable than just us talking the whole time. On this last slide is some information about how to stay in touch with our website and in email and our phone numbers, which I know you all have access to these materials, so we're not going to go over that, but we really appreciate y'all participating.
And we're always open to share ideas as well, so feel free to reach out.
This is Shaylin. I see a lot of clapping emojis coming on the screen and thank yous coming in the chat. So thank you all for this discussion, and thank you, Kimberly and Jerry, for leading us through this, and for everyone for joining this session on effectively supporting and accommodating CIL staff. Please, as the webinar closes, take some time to take the evaluation form that will pop up when the webinar closes to let us know how we can continue to improve and keep providing training that you find most useful. And thank you all again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at the next session that starts in a half hour, starting at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 11:30 a.m. Mountain time, 12:30 p.m. Central time, and 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. And I believe you'll have 3 sessions to pick from, and I may see you at one of them. So thank you all, and see you at the next one.
Thanks, everyone.